Alpine Ice Cave, Solo Explorer Overconfidence. In January 2020, a 45-year-old amateur caver named Stefan drove alone into the Austrian Alps to explore an ice cave he had read about online. The cave was at 2,100 meters elevation, accessible only by a steep hiking trail that was covered in snow and ice during winter. Stefan had been caving for about 2 years. He had explored a handful of easy tourist caves and a few wild caves with friends. He had never been in an alpine ice cave. He had never caved alone, and he had never caved in winter. But Stefan had watched dozens of videos online and read forum posts from experienced cavers who described this cave as manageable for a fit, confident person. He decided he was that person. He packed a single headlamp, a small backup torch, a bottle of water, and a chocolate bar. He wore hiking boots, jeans, and a fleece jacket. He did not bring a helmet. He did not bring spare batteries, and he did not tell anyone where he was going. The hike to the cave entrance took 2 hours in the snow. By the time Stefan reached the opening, he was already sweating from the climb. Inside the cave, the temperature dropped to -3 degrees Celsius. The floor was solid ice. The walls were covered in thick frost formations that glittered in his headlamp beam. It was the most beautiful thing Stefan had ever seen. He walked deeper into the cave, taking photos and sliding his hands along the frozen walls. About 300 meters inside, he came to a steep, icy slope that dropped into a lower chamber. The slope was covered in a smooth sheet of ice. Stefan sat down and slid. He shot down the slope faster than he expected and crashed into the wall of the lower chamber. The impact bruised his hip and knocked his headlamp off his helmet. Except he was not wearing a helmet. The headlamp hit the ice and broke. Stefan was now in a frozen cave, 300 meters from the entrance, in total darkness with a bruised hip and only a small backup torch. He turned on the backup torch and tried to climb back up the icy slope. He could not. His hiking boots had no grip on the ice. Every step forward sent him sliding back to the bottom. He tried for an hour, and his jeans were soaked from the ice. His fleece was damp from sweat. In sub-zero temperatures, wet clothing is a death sentence. His body temperature began to drop. The backup torch died after 90 minutes. Stefan sat in the dark on a floor of solid ice, shivering uncontrollably. He was not found for 3 days. A hiking group noticed a car parked alone at the trailhead for too long and reported it to Mountain Rescue. The rescue team found Stefan's body at the bottom of the ice slope. He had died of hypothermia. The rescue leader told reporters that everything about the trip was wrong. Wrong gear, wrong season, wrong cave, and wrong decision to go alone. Stefan had 2 years of experience and a lifetime of confidence. The cave needed neither. Cenote pit freediver, overconfidence death. In the spring of 2018, a 28-year-old freediver from California named Marcus flew to the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico to attempt something he had been dreaming about for years. He wanted to freedive to the bottom of one of the deepest cenotes in the region. Freediving means diving on a single breath. No tanks, no breathing apparatus, just one lungful of air and the strength to swim back up before it runs out. The cenote Marcus chose was over 40 meters deep, a crystal-clear pool surrounded by jungle with a shaft that dropped straight down into the limestone. Marcus had been freediving for 3 years. He had reached 35 meters in the ocean during training with the safety team and a line. He told his friends he could handle 40. On the morning of the dive, Marcus arrived at the cenote with 2 friends who were recreational divers. They were not trained freediving safety divers. They did not have the equipment or the skills to perform a deep water rescue if something went wrong. Marcus stretched on the rocks beside the cenote, did his breathing exercises, and told his friends to watch from the surface. He took one deep breath and dropped into the water. For the first 20 meters, everything was perfect. He kicked smoothly downward through the clear blue water, his body relaxed and streamlined. But at around 30 meters, something changed. The pressure at that depth compresses the air in the lungs to a fraction of its surface volume. The body begins to sink faster. The urge to breathe becomes overwhelming. The brain starts to scream for oxygen. Marcus reached the bottom at 40 meters. He touched the sandy floor and turned to swim back up. He was already running low on oxygen. At 25 meters on the way up, his vision began to narrow. At 15 meters, his arms stopped working properly. He was experiencing a shallow water blackout, a sudden loss of consciousness caused by dropping oxygen levels during ascent. His body went limp in the water. His friends on the surface saw his form slow down and then stop moving about 10 meters below them. One of them dove down with a mask and fins and grabbed Marcus by the arm. He dragged him to the surface. By the time they got Marcus onto the rocks and started CPR, he had been without oxygen for over 4 minutes. He never regained consciousness. Freediving experts later said that Marcus had made every mistake in the book. No safety line, no trained safety divers, no gradual depth training, and no emergency plan. He had done 35 meters once with a full team and decided that 40 meters alone was the next logical step. It was not. The Cenote did not care how confident Marcus felt on the surface. It only measured what his body could do at depth, and at 40 meters his body said no. Plura Cave Extreme Traverse Tragedy. On February 6, 2014, 5 experienced Finnish cave divers arrived at a frozen pond in northern Norway. Beneath the ice lay the entrance to the Plura Cave, the deepest cave in northern Europe. The cave stretched for 3 kilometers underwater through marble and limestone, reaching depths of over 130 meters. The water temperature was 2 degrees Celsius, cold enough to kill a person in minutes without a dry suit. The 5 divers planned to make the full traverse, entering through the submerged river entrance and swimming all the way through to a dry cave called Steinugelflaget on the other side. The traverse was supposed to take 5 hours, and it was one of the most extreme cave dives in the world. The team split into 2 groups. Patrick Grunkvist and Jari Huotarinen entered the water first. 2 hours later, Vesa Rantanen, Jari Usimaki, and Kai Kankkunen followed. The plan was for both teams to meet on the other side of the cave. Deep inside the cave, at around 130 meters, Huotarinen ran into trouble. He became entangled in an equipment cord in a narrow section of the passage. His breathing apparatus needed to be changed, but in the tight space and freezing water, something went wrong. He swallowed water while trying to switch breathing systems. Huotarinen drowned in the narrowest part of the cave, 130 meters below the surface. Grunkvist turned back and found his friend's body blocking the passage. He had seconds to make a decision. Try to pass the dead diver and continue forward, or turn around and attempt the long swim back through the deepest section. He chose to go forward. It took him 15 agonizing minutes to squeeze past Huotarinen's body in the tight tunnel. Behind him, the second team was approaching the same spot. Rantanen reached the body next and somehow got past it. But Usimaki, the diver behind him, did not. Police believe Usimaki panicked when he saw Huotarinen's body in the passage. He drowned right there, in the same narrow section, meters from his dead friend. The 5th diver, Kankkunen, tried to help Usimaki, but it was too late. He turned around and began the long swim back the way they had come. He did not surface until the early hours of the next morning, more than 11 hours after the dive began. He had to smash through a layer of ice to reach the air. All 3 survivors were hospitalized with decompression sickness. Rantanen suffered a spinal injury. Norwegian authorities closed the cave and called in British divers Rick Stanton and John Valanthen to recover the bodies. But even the world's best cave divers judged the recovery too dangerous. Months later, the Finnish survivors went back illegally and recovered their friends' bodies themselves. Rick Stanton later told the BBC that with proper training and planning, this should never have happened to experienced divers. The Plura Cave Traverse was one of the most extreme dives on Earth. The 5 Finnish divers believed they were ready for it. 2 of them were wrong. Blue Hole Yuri Lipski death. On April 28, 2000, diving instructor Yuri Lipski arrived at the Blue Hole in Egypt. The Blue Hole is a massive underwater sinkhole in the Red Sea. While it is technically a sinkhole, the ceiling and walls create a cave-like environment. The Blue Hole is one of the most dangerous dive sites in the world. Hundreds of divers have died in this location over the years. Yuri Lipski was an experienced diving instructor who knew the risks. He decided to attempt what divers call a bounce dive. A bounce dive means descending rapidly to extreme depth and returning quickly. Lipski planned to dive alone to the bottom of the Blue Hole. The bottom was over 295 feet deep. He carried a handheld camera to record his dive. Lipski entered the water and began his rapid descent into the blue abyss. The camera recorded his view as he dropped deeper and deeper. The walls of the sinkhole surrounded him on all sides like a cave. As he descended past 165 feet, the danger zone began. At extreme depth, nitrogen in a diver's air supply becomes toxic to the brain. This condition is called nitrogen narcosis, and it feels like being drunk. Divers with nitrogen narcosis cannot think clearly or make good decisions. They become confused, disoriented, and unable to judge danger properly. Lipski continued descending rapidly past 230 feet, then 260 feet. The camera shows he was dropping far too fast for a safe dive. By the time he reached over 295 feet, the nitrogen narcosis had taken full effect. His brain was severely impaired by the toxic nitrogen in his blood. At the bottom of the blue hole, Lipski realized something was terribly wrong. The camera captured his frantic movements as panic set in. He tried desperately to inflate his buoyancy compensator device. The buoyancy compensator is a vest that helps divers float back to the surface. But Lipski was too confused and disoriented to operate his equipment correctly. His hands fumbled with the controls as the nitrogen narcosis clouded his mind. The footage shows his breathing becoming rapid and panicked. Every breath at that extreme depth consumed his limited air supply faster. Lipski tried over and over to inflate the vest and rise from the bottom. But his impaired brain could not coordinate the simple actions needed. Time was running out as his air supply dropped critically low. The camera recorded his movements becoming slower and weaker. Eventually, Yuri Lipski collapsed on the seafloor at over 295 feet deep. He'd lost consciousness from the combination of nitrogen narcosis and air depletion. Yuri Lipski died alone on the bottom of the blue hole. His body was recovered days later along with his handheld camera. The camera had recorded every moment of his final dive.